Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to speak about the UCLA Global Internship Program in Bali. I apologize for technical difficulties of starting a few minutes late, but we are now here and ready to present to you. My name is Andrew Bottom. I am the Associate Director for the Global Internship Program here at UCLA, and I have a few of my colleagues here to also help me present about the Bali program today. So I'm first going to introduce Lavina, if you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Hi, I'm Lavina, and I'm a second year materials engineering student. So I'm here because I went to Bali this past summer and here to answer any questions that you have and share about my experience.
So I'll have an opportunity to talk to Lavina towards the end of the session, speak about her experience, then some Q&A as well from audience members. And then I also want to throw it over to Claire, who is our colleague who assists with the placement process and takes care of you while you are abroad in Bali.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for coming, everyone. I'm the founder of Start Me Up, and we run internships in Indonesia. And I've lived in Indonesia for many years, so I'm going to go over a little bit about what we offer in terms of the program and how we're a bit different to maybe some of the other programs out there, and also what you can expect from an internship in Bali.
And just as an advisory note, we have held academic track specific sessions over the last week where we went a little bit more in depth regarding the academics, regarding the coursework that you might be taking on the program. So in this session, we were really trying to focus as much as possible on the experience in Bali. And there are multiple students from different academic tracks that are at this session. So you could be an engineering student, you might be a student in education, for instance. And so we'll try to give a larger overview of what that might be like, but feel free to ask more specific questions to you during the Q&A or in the chat. So I'll do a quick little overview of the UCLA kind of logistical piece, but try really to focus mostly on the experience in Bali. So for our Bali program itself, we'll talk a little about the overview and eligibility, placement process and timeline, and then again, get more into focusing on interning in Bali, past internship examples, and the funding options for students, as well as speaking with Lavina. So for the Bali program, this program is open to students through the academic tracks of education, engineering, global affairs, political science, and public affairs. Please note that global affairs and political science are open to non-majors. So that means that you could be like a sociology student or psychology student, for instance. You could apply through those tracks. We also have the career sectors, which are basically the kind of areas of focus of your internship. In Bali include education, engineering. We know engineering, for instance, has a lot of different areas, and so Claire will go more in depth on that, but education and engineering, a lot of work at NGOs and nonprofits, and specifically there's a lot of focus through all academic tracks of internships that are focusing on climate and sustainability, really is a major focus of the Bali program. There's more information about the placement opportunities we'll show you later on in this presentation and where you can find that on our website. Some example roles, and Claire will go more in depth on this when she is speaking in her part of the presentation, but there's a lot of roles in policy and communications, bio and environmental engineering, water engineering. There's various communication internships, focus on conservation technology, policy and advocacy, materials engineering, software engineering, and more. So again, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about some placement examples later on, but these are some general roles that there's some robust placements in Bali that you might find when you are speaking with Claire more in depth about what your career goals are and what you hope to accomplish in Bali. The program itself for all students going to Bali occurs during June 21st through August 17th. So these are the dates you would actually physically be in Bali. The program is also accompanied by 10 weeks of coursework. So that's June 24th through August 30th. You'll be taking 4 to 8 units of coursework, and you must be enrolled in both courses, which is the 8 units to be eligible for financial aid. These types of internships are academic, so they're unpaid, and you will be interning approximately 32 hours per week. So 4 days a week, approximately 32 hours. The eligibility, depending on your academic track, you may need to be a major or minor, but as I mentioned, political science and global affairs are open to non-majors. For course prerequisites, the only program with a course prerequisite is education, which is the requirement of taking education 180 prior to going abroad. For everyone, there's a 3.0 GPA minimum. You must have 90 units by spring 2024 and have good academic standing. But just suggest that you review your program page to see what the requirements are for your specific program if you have any questions. And then the coursework, each of the students who are going on the program will have a mandatory 195 internship course. This course will be related to your academic track. So if you're an education student, there'll be an education course, 195 CE. If you're a political science student, that'd be poli-sci 195 CE, engineering 195. So that's an example of what that mandatory course would look like. All students are also eligible to take the CESC 130 course, which is Intercultural Communication in the Global Workplace. Depending on your academic track, this may satisfy major or minor or GE requirements. So again, please see your program information page for more information about your specific program. And the application is currently open. So it is open now until November 27th. You can apply anytime for the application and it's treated equally, but I highly encourage you to apply early if you're interested, because that means you get to do the second step in the application process, which is an advising interview with the Start Me Up team, which is would be Claire or Quintan, which is her colleague, who'd be speaking to you more about your career goals and interests and learning more about you as a candidate. And if you do apply on the last day, like a lot of students do, which is about, say, 90% of students apply that last week, that means your advising session may occur during 10th week finals or during your vacation in December. So it's always advantageous, I think, to apply early if at all possible. The placement process, we do have a placement process video, and I'm just going to share the link here as not to, actually, I don't have the link on me at this second. I'm going to pull it up here in a second once I move over to Claire, but we do have a placement process video that talks a little bit more about how the placement process works, more in depth. We're not going to focus on that today because we again want to focus more on the experience in Bali, but just note that once you apply, your second step is an advising session with the Start Me Up team, which would occur prior to the end of December, and it can occur anytime after you apply. And then we send out application notifications of whether you are accepted into the program in mid-January. And there's no financial commitment up until you receive acceptance into the program. So there's nothing to lose to apply from the get-go and to learn more about it through that advising interview. There's some sample placement opportunities that you can review on each of the program web pages. So they'll be a little bit different depending on the academic track that you're focused on. So education placements are obviously going to be different than engineering placements. These are not an exhaustive list of what is possible, but just gives you a general idea of what you might be doing while you're in Bali, what some past students have done. And if you see something that does really interest you, definitely mention that to the Start Me Up team. They may not be able to promise that that particular placement will be available or that particular project will be available this upcoming summer, but they at least will have an idea of what sort of interest that you have, and they can then have a better idea of what sort of organizations or companies you might want to intern with. And without further ado, I'm now going to throw it over to Claire to talk more specifically about the experience in Bali.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And we can skip to the next slide, actually, I think. Yeah, so we're just going to cover a brief overview of what we are and how long we've been going, and a little bit of an intro into kind of sustainability, climate, and net zero careers and why they're so important right now. And then we'll cover, Indonesia and Bali's relationship with Indonesia and kind of that context of working in the country of Indonesia and, what that could potentially offer you during an internship experience. We'll then go into some example internships, organizations that we partner with, and the kind of things that students have done previously. And then I will have the questions, I think, a little later once Andrew has finished and resuming the presentation, and Lavina's also presented as well. So you can switch slides now. Thank you. So we've been going since 2016. We specialize in climate technology and sustainability internship placements. In Bali, we've had lots of students from UCLA, but also from other universities all across the world. We tend to have had many students of STEM disciplines gravitate towards us, but not exclusively. So really, in terms of what we can offer students of any discipline a great internship experience in working with our different partner organizations. You can move over to the next one. So we focus on so really green skills, I guess, as they're known now. So green skills are essentially the skills that we need in order to move to a more sustainable future. So as there's huge pressure on companies everywhere to transition to net zero. It's a case of, can the workforce skill up quick enough in order to help that transition happening? And obviously there's like huge pressure from lots of different stakeholders, from governments and regulators, but also from customers and investors as well, who are seeking to work with more sustainable organizations. So really what we're doing is working with organizations that are working across different types of sustainable development goals. You may have heard of those. I'll talk about those in a bit more detail in a future slide, but essentially you'll be building skills which will be applicable across the sustainable development goals. And that's like really, really important. Even if you don't want to go and work for a non-profit after you graduate, you're going to be, the chances are that you're going to encounter this in your career, like wherever you end up working. And really the direction of travel is that lots of investment money is going towards more sustainable and green technologies. So there's actually lots and lots of opportunities in this area, which there really wasn't, maybe 5 or even 10 years ago. So it's a very exciting time, and really there's lots of opportunities out there. So we're really good towards giving students that experience and helping them understand where they could potentially have a kind of career working and using those kind of skills and being part of that in transition, but in an international environment. So why Indonesia matters? I think often Indonesia may be overlooked as a country. I think a lot of people are really shocked when they come to Indonesia and that they realize that it is actually the third largest democracy in the world. It's home to 270 million people. It's the largest economy in Southeast Asia. It's growing very, very quickly. It's a member of G20, actually hosted the G20 meeting, I think it's the year before last. So it's growing very quickly. It's essentially just behind the US and India in terms of population size as a democratic country. So there's lots and lots of things happening there in terms of development. And there's also a very vibrant civil society with thousands of NGOs working across different fields, from development to human rights and conservation and all kinds of different areas. And I think the other thing about Indonesia that's really amazing is that it is home to just incredible ecosystems, So it's essentially it's a place where you have rainforest, you have pristine rainforest of Borneo, you have amazing coral reefs and all this kind of amazing wildlife, which really needs to be protected. So it's a very unusual place. And Bali, obviously, is probably the most famous island in Indonesia. So Indonesia has 17,000 islands. It's absolutely huge country. And Bali is extremely famous. It's slightly different to the rest of Indonesia. It's Hindu, and it has a really beautiful culture, which has obviously attracted lots of interest from many tourists for a long time. But it really does offer a unique environment because it is essentially you're working in a sort of semi-rural location, so you're not necessarily working in the big city like you would be if you worked in the capital of Indonesia, such as Jakarta. But it's a very interesting place, and there's lots of activity there because there's a lot of investment money that flows into Bali because it's such a hub for tourism, and there's also many international schools and many expats there as well. So that's kind of helped really put it on the map. And now actually a lot of Indonesians choose to live in Bali, regardless of whether or not they're actually from Bali, because it's a really great place to live and there's lots of opportunities there. So really it's become a hub. Most Indonesians that are working at the organizations that we partner with, pretty much all of them are bilingual. They speak amazing English. The Balinese speak amazing English. And really you get a chance to work with lots of people from across the world. So, but, the flip side of that, and part of the reason why in the organizations really value working with people like you is that they face lots of challenges in Bali. So because of all the tourism, that really does put a strain on resources, particularly water. There's the number of swimming pools that are required to cater to the number of tourists that Bali gets means that there's a huge demand for water on the island, and actually it's a real struggle. So one of the students who was from UCLA this year, her project was actually working on a project in water conservation in rural Bali, helping to change the way that the communities run in order to promote and improve water retention in the soil. So lots and lots of challenges when it comes to conservation and things that possibly you may take for granted at home, but also lots of opportunities to do something about it. A lot of people who are very interested in conservation and nature and preservation, and also technology and design, who from around the world. So it's very, very unusual place. And I think it's safe to say that most people are really shocked about what they encounter when they go to Bali, because it provides a lot more than I think a lot of people imagine. So yeah, as in terms of Indonesia being a wonderful place to intern, I think I just reiterate that there are substantial environmental challenges in Indonesia, but also really precious ecosystems that need to be preserved, and that there are like various different challenges that they're facing, from climate. Some of the climate change is already starting to have an impact on the kind of lives of everyday farmers across Indonesia. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunities. The fast-growing economy means there's a lot of international investment. Indonesia is sort of home to like a lot of raw materials and minerals, which are going to be very useful in terms of the transition to electric vehicles and electric batteries. So there is a lot of investment going into Indonesia. And then really also there's just a unique mix of people and organizations there. Another thing which may be a bit of interest to the engineering students particularly is that also Indonesia has a domestic engineering skills shortage, so it doesn't actually have enough engineers to cater to the development and the pace of industrialization that it needs to actually capitalize on its current standing. So there is a domestic engineering skills shortage, and particularly in semi-rural locations. So that means that when you intern in Bali, especially if you're an engineer, you'll be often given lots of responsibility and you'll be very much in demand in terms of your skills, and you can also add a lot of value to those organizations. So that's a kind of interesting angle as well on that. So how you'll be working to solve critical challenges. Really, a lot of the organizations that we're working with are touching many of these different sustainable development goals. So these are the key kind of 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which you probably encountered everywhere possibly, and many different companies are having to, so all big companies actually having to report increasingly on how they are progressing towards these goals. And it's a huge topic in the corporate world in terms of measuring and monitoring the impact on these different goals, and trying to improve the impact that you have on these different areas. And really, there's so much here that relates to the Indonesian context, because there is huge disparities of wealth and also massive challenges in terms of logistics and kind of the geographical spread of everyone in the country, actually, because they're so spread out. But the one thing that's very interesting about Indonesians is that they are huge adopters of digital technology, and they pretty much universally have access to smartphones and incredible data coverage across the archipelago. So there's kind of this amazing confluence of big challenges across a diverse range of areas, across everything from coral reef conservation to agriculture and water and health. But there's also this amazing opportunity in the form of very widespread smartphone usage, ownership, and also amazing connectivity, really, which, I mean, it's the connectivity in rural Indonesia is far superior to the connectivity in rural England, where I'm from. And I'm told by my American friends that in rural areas in the United States, it's often hard to get coverage as well sometimes. And but in Indonesia, you actually have amazing coverage. So it's really amazing, because a lot of that infrastructure has been laid relatively recently. So it's really, really interesting. Deforestation is also a big topic, with more and more people interested in things like climate or carbon offsetting, for example. The act of preserving mangroves and also the Borneo rainforest is increasingly important as well. So, but it's also lots of economic incentives and kind of legacy activities which threaten that. So there's lots and lots of different areas. And I think if you go to Indonesia on an internship, you will get to encounter a lot of these up close and really get exposed to a lot of really interesting areas, which are hugely relevant for all kinds of organizations, because all big organizations, many big, large supranational organizations have a footprint there. So it's very interesting from that perspective. So in terms of the organizations that we work with, Lavina will share some more in terms of her experience of working with one of the partner organizations we work with called Kopernik. Essentially, Kopernik works across multiple different areas, for example. across in sustainable development. So looking at ways they can innovate to promote sustainable development across lots of different areas, from it could be health, it could be education, it could be agriculture, access to food and things like that. We also work with organizations that only specialize in their particular problem. So it could be a coral reef conservation organization. We work with people who in renewable energy. We also have, and particularly agriculture as well, is a huge topic. But there's also a lot of people working in different areas around plastics, looking at plastic recycling. Waste is a huge problem. Health is a huge problem. Is a huge challenge. And also we have technology companies as well. So things like electric vehicle startups as well. We've also worked with partner organizations who help with prosthetic limbs for people who've lost limbs. So we really have a broad range of different organizations. So yeah, in terms of kind of sectors, just kind of reiterating and adding a few more, really across circular economy is how you would describe a lot of these organizations, the ones that are looking at new ways of manufacturing and using products. But also you're getting kind of the mix of technology in there. So we've worked with Internet of Things as well. Transportation has come up, like as in with the electric vehicles. Different areas of sustainable food as well, which kind of links to agriculture. So essentially what we do, so a big challenge in our sector, I think, is that it's really important that we build these long-term partnerships with the organizations that we work with. So you obviously, as part of this program, come out to Indonesia and you spend 2 months working for an organization in Indonesia. And it's very important that the work that you do gets carried on after the internship is over. So actually, after Lavina's project, we actually kind of continued the conversation with the organization and actually spoke to a mentor who actually we put Lavina in touch with already about how they could continue the project and build on the work that Lavina had done. So if there is many interns on the program work towards a report at the end of their internship. And they get support from us and a mentor doing that. Not all students work towards a report, but when it's suitable, they do. And when they do create a report, if the organization doesn't have the resources, we'll arrange for that report to be translated into Indonesian or whichever local dialect it needs to be translated into, so that it can be shared with stakeholders and be extra useful. So really, we just want the work that you do to be as useful to the community as possible and to make sure that the things that you learn stay in Indonesia and help the communities there longer term as well. You can, yes, thank you. So yeah, here's an example of an internship brief. So we have a lot of briefs from previous interns and descriptions of organizations. So as Andrew said, they are on the UCLA Global Internships website. But if you would like a more detailed description, because actually our briefs tend to have like an intro about the organization with a longer kind of series of bullet points about what happened during the internship, then just email me and I can share those with you. So just to bear in mind that the internship briefs, we try our best to work with the organizations to make sure that those briefs are exactly what your internship will be, but sometimes that doesn't always happen and the internship the scope maybe creeps a little bit in a slightly different direction, or they add on extra responsibilities if you're kind of particularly curious about one area. So it's not always 100% set in stone, but broadly, that's what you're working on. So this is an example of an organization that's called Perfect Fit, actually spun out of Copernic. So it was started off as a program to promote, to support women's health. So women's health, huge challenge, a lot of challenges that women face, like particularly in relation to their menstrual health, is not discussed. It's a huge taboo in Indonesia. It's a huge taboo everywhere, but especially in Indonesia. So they started kind of as an education program, and essentially then realized that they could sell products and services to that community. So then they've really done that, and they're kind of like, they've got a sort of commercialization arm as well as kind of raising money from their nonprofits. So they're a really cool organization. They're called Perfect Fit, and we currently have actually someone who's in doing this exact internship for Perfect Fit, and her job is to work on a partnership strategy essentially for the organization, so helping them develop like new partner relationships which they can. So this is kind of more on the for the people who are working on in political science and those kind of academic tracks. And actually, she's very exciting for her. She's just been flown to another part of Indonesia to actually go and learn more about those communities and meet a lot of those women in those communities as part of her internship. So that's been very exciting for her. But yeah, so that role is kind of a research essentially and a report writing role. Another example organization was one from a couple of years back called Azura Indonesia. It's a social enterprise that helps people who essentially fish for a living to move to a more sustainable way of powering their boats. So in Indonesia, actually, people, I mean, it is mainly fishermen. There's not that many fisherwomen, but mainly, and they typically spend about half their daily takings on the fuel that powers their boat. So this social enterprise was working on transitioning to a solar powered version of that. And we had a chemical engineering student from UCLA whose job was to basically figure out how to make those solar panels last longer, because the nature of the climate, the very tropical, very humid climate that we have in Bali means that the solar panels can corrode and degrade quickly. So that was her job, and she got to meet the people that she was doing this for, and go and find out where they lived and learn more about ways that they could potentially tackle that challenge. Another example we had was with a coral reef conservation organization. They work across the Coral Triangle, which is a large area of very precious coral reefs, which they're trying to protect. And they were working on a few different projects. One of the things, they worked with a mechanical engineering student from UCLA to essentially look at ways that they could modernize their coral reef monitoring process. So much of the monitoring that goes on in coral reefs is done traditionally has been done by scientific divers who go and they count the fish and all of the life underwater. And essentially what the NGO was looking for was someone to look into how they could modernize that approach through technology. So how they could develop technological solutions to help them essentially find out how to better monitor the life underwater. And they researched kind of various different types of underwater photography options on drones, but also kind of looking at machine learning and things which could be used to maybe build up a picture of what's happening under the water. So yeah, this was an interesting project as well. That was, I think, written up in the UCLA magazine, ended up on the UCLA homepage from a bioengineering student from last year. And the goal was to devise a kind of low-cost, low-tech method of water purification that could be used on this site. So they're trying to reduce the use of agricultural chemicals, right? Because it ends up in the water supply and can be damaging to people's health. And there's not super strict regulations about these things in Indonesia. So really, they were looking at this particular organization, which is trying to help farmers transition to a more sustainable way of farming, wanted a method for water purification that would be something that would be kind of low cost, but really intelligent and also do the job well. And so he developed a kind of floating reef, a vetiver grass, which is a grass which grows across Indonesia, and that essentially could be put in the waterways and help purify some of the water. So so this was his workplace for some of the internships. So some of the workplaces are a mix. We have normal conventional offices, co-working spaces, but sometimes you're going to somewhere that looks a little bit like this. So this is an example for those of you who are studying education majors you might be interested in. There's actually a lot of education programs across Indonesia working in all kinds of different areas. This is one organization called PBF, and they work on all kinds of kind of upskilling across Indonesia. Typically, their projects are actually their headquarters is in Bali, but their projects are across in other parts of Indonesia. And so really what they're doing is building out these different programs in the community, typically working with young people and helping them build up their skills in a kind of their career skills. But they also really want, they are interested in working with interns who can assist them with developing frameworks for impact measurements, so demonstrating the effectiveness of, and this is a huge challenge for NGOs, but also for any big organizations that partner with NGOs and give them money and want to demonstrate how effective those those partnerships are. So looking at impact measurement and of exactly what that looks like in terms of the student, and refining those metrics, and also for a curriculum evaluation, and also working to improve the resources and the teaching resources that those people who take part in that programs essentially benefit from. Here's an example of a communications and advocacy internship. So this would have been with the Terra Water Foundation. So that's the NGO arm of Terra Water, and this was essentially helping them do something similar, but for their education programs, and helping them essentially improve the impact measurement of that, but also improve the way that they communicate the effectiveness of these projects to their stakeholders. So basically also identifying areas where they could improve their data collection for future reports. So this kind of work is such a big part of what goes on, like the impact measurement, refinement, and improvement of projects. It's really important that these NGOs particularly can demonstrate their effectiveness. And like in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, this comes up a lot, and it's relevant to all disciplines really, because those in the science and engineering also need to be thinking about how effective their solutions are to the community, and obviously those who are from the social sciences also need to be looking to do comparative analysis and seeing what works in different communities, and are they achieving behavior change and on any particular level, and the incentives right, etc., etc. So there's lots of different areas and ways that can be relevant to all subject disciplines.
All right. Thank you, Claire, for sharing more about the experience in Bali and placement opportunities. Of course, not an exhaustive list, but just wanted to give you all some examples. We're going to connect here with Lavina in just a second, but just wanted to mention that for these programs, for global internships, there is financial aid eligible as long as you take the both courses and have 8 units. You'll just need to apply for the 24-25 FAFSA and DREAM Act by the priority deadline. There's some additional forms to fill out once you're accepted into the program, but quite easy in terms of what you need to complete. And then there are various scholarships. So on our website, there's various scholarships we will send along to you once you've applied to the program. None are open prior to applying. So once you've applied, we'll forward along relevant scholarships to you. But just note there's various scholarships and funding to help support your time abroad, so that you're not just using financial aid, but you also have some scholarship funding to support that. And then just note that we do have the program budgets listed on our website. Depending on if you do 40 units or 8 units, your program fee will be slightly different. All of the meals, transportation, round-trip airfare are all estimates. So generally those could fluctuate depending on your own spending habits. But financial aid will package the entire program based on our estimates, so that you will have enough funding for your time in Bali, to make sure that you aren't going hungry or any of the such. And now I want to invite Lavina to talk a little bit more about her experience. She was an intern this past summer, and maybe you could just start, Lavina, by sharing a little bit more about where you interned and kind of a brief description of your internship role.
Yeah, hi. So this past summer, I interned in Bali in this kind of city called Ubud. I don't know if you would refer to it as a city, but basically I interned at Copernic, which is a NGO that kind of just dabbles in a bunch of different things. For me specifically, I was on a team called that does like the research and development side for the company. And one of the main projects I've been working on was to kind of research on biomaterials for farming applications. Yeah, that's kind of
I think one thing that might be helpful is to explain I don't know, everyone might know what biomaterial is and why we might need them. Okay, yeah. So specifically for my project, I worked on creating these mulching mats, which are basically mats that you put on the soil, and it kind of stops sunlight from getting to the soil. And hence, say you're planting a coffee plant or a chocolate tree or something like that. So the soil surrounding the tree won't be able to have the essential nutrients for weeds to grow. And that really helps to decrease costs, or the time cost of having manual labor to go around each tree and pick up the weeds.
So in Indonesia, they don't really know about mulching mats before this project started, at least for the farmers that we were working with. And so we introduced them to this technology, which is a mulching mat. However, if you were to like say buy a mulching mat from like an online store, the import costs are high, and it's just like not a really sustainable method for especially just farmers in rural areas of Bali. So we devised that we would create this mulching mat out of coconut husks and a kind of binder that acts as sort of like a glue that like sticks all the coconut husks together. And that binder is made up of sodium alginate and this mixture of calcium. And so basically the importance of, I guess, biomaterials from my experience in Bali is that there's actually many different types of biomaterials that you can dabble in. It doesn't really have to be specifically biocompatible. It could just be derived from natural carbon-based sources. And so one of the main project deliverables that I kind of achieved during my 2 months in Bali is that I learned a lot about bioplastics, or more specifically like bio-based plastics, which are basically plastics derived from carbon-based sources like corn and sugarcane. And I got to do a presentation on that with one of my coworkers during the company's quarterly meeting. So that was a really good experience of learning how to present a topic to a big company and kind of organizing ideas to make them clear and concise.
And what
And
would you?
they
Oh, go.
Go on,
Sorry, Claire.
sorry. I was going to say, just to put that in the Indonesian context, exploring materials which are bio-derived on some level is very important because in general, and building up a knowledge base in that area, because there's way too much plastic, and they have a big problem with plastic pollution. So like the work that Lavina was doing is really interesting in terms of supporting Copernic, the organization, building up a knowledge base on alternative materials that they can use from actually things that they maybe can find, although not everything, all of the ingredients in this particular thing could be sourced from Indonesia, I don't think. But the more that they can do that, the more that will reduce the reliance on plastics and other materials which are not very sustainable. So it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, like the research I did wasn't going only into the specific biomaterial project I was. It could also kind of help future projects. I made kind of like these films out of the sodium alginate, and we kind of did testing on them as well.
And what would you say, Lavina, now that you've come back and reflected on the experience, what sort of transferable skills do you think from this internship you could use either at your academically at UCLA and or in a future career opportunity, both whether it's a hard skill or soft skills that you learn?
One kind of hard skill I gained was using computer-aided design. So previously I was using Fusion 360, but at the office, most of the coworkers that did do like CADing, they used SolidWorks, and I kind of got more experience working with SolidWorks on a more practical application as opposed to me using Fusion to create like these fun figurines for my own leisure. And for a soft skill, I think one of the main ones that I've picked up from my experience is kind of noticing and learning how to, I guess, like react to cultural differences. So during the internship, I also took the optional course apart from the 195 course, where I learned about intercultural communication, and I got to really reflect on how my experience growing up in a country outside of US and going to US for school and then going to Bali for my internship, how that really like changes my perspective, or how my perspective on a certain like thing or a conflict may be really different than how someone else may see things. So I think that is a really good skill to have, especially as you go into the workplace and you meet people from like many different backgrounds.
Thank you. And what would you say, what was like a normal day for you? Commuting to work and, like what would you say like a normal day students might experience while they're in Bali?
So in Bali, it's most convenient to kind of ride scooter, or basically you can think of it as like a motorcycle. And so I didn't ride the scooter myself. I just kind of like, you can call, same way you can call it Uber here, you can call like a Grab bike there and someone will come pick you up. So a normal day of work would be to wake up and go to work, and then typically I will have lunch with my coworkers, or they'll bring me somewhere and we'll try new foods, and it's quite chill. And so work typically goes from 9 to 5, and then afterwards you basically can forget about work and like in the evening. So I would either like hang out with the people in my cohort that also went to Bali. I would go to the gym, or I would just explore the surrounding areas. And since I also was taking the other course, and there's like the two courses that I took, I kind of liked to spread out my coursework throughout the week. So each week we had weekly lectures that the professor recorded, and she was nice enough to kind of break them into separate small videos. So each night I would plan on like watch a small part of each lecture and kind of work up to the assignments that were due at the end of each week.
And finally, what would you say was one of your most memorable experiences? It could be outside the workplace, but just like something that you really enjoyed while you were in Bali, that you would want to share.
Um, there was so I was in Bali from like mid-June to mid-August, and then I think the last week before I left to go back to Hong Kong, it was Indonesian Independence Day. So at my office, the coworkers had like usually work from 9 to 5, but right after lunch on that day, um, we all just like celebrated and played games. So there was like this game where they tied like a fish cracker thing on the ceiling, and you had to kind of try to eat it without using your hands. And so those games were really fun. I got to learn about their culture and kind of bond with my coworkers. And we all wore like red and white because it's merah dan putih, which is like the colors of the Indonesian flag. And so it was a really fun time. I got to have a lot of fun.
Thank you, Lavina. And I know we're over time, but we'll have some minutes for questions too. But just wanted to mention that we do have some other past student experiences that we'll be highlighting on our website. We just created a student experience tab. So I know that Sharish, there's a news article written recently about his experience. We'll have some quotes up. We just moved to a whole new platform, so we're just loading some of this information now. But definitely want to highlight what our past students have done. And if you do have questions for past returnees, you can always feel free to reach out. We have a student ambassador section on our website. For this past year, we don't have anyone specifically indicated from Bali, but if you do reach out to myself, and my email will be at the end of the screen, we can always try to connect you with other recipients or other past participants to see if they'd be interested in speaking with you. We do have, however, students from all different academic disciplines that did a global internship program in general that can still provide you information about how to manage your time, what it's like to conduct a global internship abroad. And so definitely feel free to utilize that resource. It's again on our UCLA Global Internship website under student ambassadors. And my email is also right here, and I'll put it in the chat. And again, this is an opportunity if you have any questions to reach out, and I'm happy to assist through the application process once you apply, and or if you are accepted into the program, assist you throughout your time preparing to go abroad and while you are abroad. Obviously, we have the Start Me Up team too that will be providing a lot of information as well, but always here to support from the UCLA end. And without further ado, we appreciate you all hanging on longer with us. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to open it up for questions. I'll retract real quickly to note that if you are a engineering student or public affairs, I'm specifically your advisor. And then if you are a education, global affairs, or political science, or you are planning to apply to one of those tracks that are open to non-majors, Anna Arellano is technically your advisor, so you can reach out to her directly or reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you with Anna if the question's more relevant for her to answer. So what I'm going to do now is stop the recording and then open it up quickly for questions.